Hello Happy Pack family, we are here today at the Black Soldier Fly Farm and I'm so excited to take you on a journey. Come.
Yeah, so this is the feed plant. So basically what happens here is we take in a whole bunch of raw materials from industry. So largely we work with the breweries, as you know, so mainly spent brewery grain in the east. That'll come in and get stored in bins on that side of the factory. So we have a bay, it's about 1,500 square meters, which is just for receiving storage of raw materials. When we're ready, they come in here, they get dosed into these bins, tipped into the mixers over here. We'll go up and have a look. And then what happens is the trays that we grow the larvae in come up this side, they get fed with feed, and then they get a dose of little insects on top of that, and then they go into the chambers for 7 more days. So in total, we grow our larvae consistently for 4 days plus 7 days, so 11 days. That allows us to control not only the climate for the insects and how they grow, but therefore the nutrition of the insects, how much chitin there is, how much protein there is. And so each batch is consistent across. And because we on a clean, traceable diet, because we don't have any worries about contamination, about heavy metals, etc. Although we do check that off.
That's what I really love about working with you, is the very clear traceability and sustainability protocols of Maltento, and that you are always consistent with the feed, which is the spent grains from breweries.
As it comes out of a silo, through a pipe, into a tank, into our collection. So it's really, there's no way that someone could contaminate that meat.
That makes sense. And then how that impacts us is it's very clear that we can monitor the peptides, the proteins, and amino acids in terms of larvae, which impacts the dog's diet, which is so important to us.
So we're a European grade facility. It's a working facility, so it's never going to look overly neat, but it's it's European grade. So that traceability of the feedstock using non-catering byproducts or waste streams is important. The traceability through everything. So if we wanted to know that this batch of larvae, we could trace back to them. That's what's beautiful about our system. And it's taken us a long time to get to that point that we really understand that really well.
Which is so important for us making dog food, because we have to guarantee the well-being of the dog, which is so important. And when we go through that, I'd love you to kind of dig into that a bit more, because that's the very reason we love working with people. It's about making a massive impact on the dogger's food, their gut and their cognitive health.
Exactly. Let's take a walk up here and I'll show you quickly what the little tray is. So what sets Maltento apart slightly is that we didn't look at ourselves as like fancy biotech, agri-tech, AI, where we really saw that at the beginning of the operation where you are farming something, you're farming an insect, why not use farming equipment? That allows you to keep the cost of production down while still maintaining that quality. Again, it's farm grade stuff, so if you're willing to eat the beef that uses that or the swine, why not insect?
Totally.
And so basically what we do is these mixers and everything really come from industry. What happens is we tip the grain, we tip some bakery byproducts in here, we tip some sort of protein byproducts in here. That all gets blended up in these mixers, 4 tons at a time, and there's 2 of them. And then they're constantly feeding into this hopper, which then pumps up behind me into another holding hopper. The bins come up here, they get dosed with a specific amount of feed of the load cell, and then they get stacked up on this side, and then they sort of drop back down. And so our bins look like this, and you'll see over here there's some baby neonates on here that are starting to eat inside.
Look at that baby larva.
So these guys are about 4 days old, and then they will sit in this tray now for 7 more days in a chamber where we do nothing. We just leave them to do their magic and kind of consume this feed. And what will happen is this sort of grainy looking color will all turn into this sort of colored medium, and this is what's called frass. So frass is the byproduct of the insect, which is basically we call it a soil amendment. So we sell it back into agriculture as a
fertilizer.
It's not classified fertilizer, we call it a soil amendment. So it's high in microbial life, high in chitin, and NPK as well. So really good for soil rejuvenation.
It's incredible. So there's a whole circular system going on.
So if you look at the gut, we always talk about the guts of the animal and the insect and the stimulation there. The frass has a big stimulatory effect on the soil. So you think of the ecosystem of the soil, how important that is. It all starts with those microbes and bringing in insects and then bringing in birds, etc. And that's kind of what allows that soil to be really healthy.
It's amazing. Yeah. And that tiny little larvae then becomes what we'll see shortly, is into the blanch larvae that we use in the food. And so it's all like goodness and protein and everything that actually impacts the dog's gut health.
Yeah, and as we said, we've got a nutritionist, a doctor in our team that she basically balances diet. She's formulated over 300 different diets with different ingredients depending on what's best. And this is kind of where we've landed from an optimal perspective, given where we're situated and what's available, given pricing, given yields, etc., and sort of the larva we want to get out, which is a relatively high protein base to fat. All those things are critical, and so we're able to control those pretty well.
So fascinating. When you see the process, you understand how the value of larvae is so important to dog food.
Yeah, exactly. It's now effectively our daily neonate chamber. So this is where, after the little babies hatch from their eggs, they get put in these little tubs over here, and then they grow. And you would see this is what was dumped on top of that other bigger tray, and there'll be somewhere in here. If you, hopefully these are a good one. We have started to do again, but they're small in there, and they will be deep down here. It's a bit dry, so they'll be quite close to the bottom. But effectively, there's about 40,000 in this tray.
Fascinating.
40,000 little babies in here that get put onto the big tray, and for rough figures, it's about a gram of babies that will turn into about 4.5 kilos of larvae within 11 days.
Yeah. Within 11 days.
We're now going to go back into where they dose the baby insects. So as they're hatched, they get put into those trays. Now we're going to go into like really day-old babies. So I guess in human terms, we call it the neolithic.
Day-old babies.
Yeah.
Here we come.
So this room generally will be very high humidity and warm, just to keep them comfortable and keep them active. But these are the baby larvae that you can see here. So if I tilt it slightly, might be difficult with the camera, but what I can tell you is there are a lot of little babies here, and you can see each individual one in there.
They are tiny.
They really are tiny. So this is where a gram is anything between 40,000 and 50,000, depending who you ask. We've gone from the nursery and the baby insects and the feed plant. We're now on the other side of the facility, which is really the biology. So as we said, that's kind of the heart of the business. If you don't have the baby insects being born every day, you can't eat the feed, which means you can't produce larvae. And basically what we do is every day we need a certain amount of insects to come through the system, and that allows us to set for a certain amount of feed and produce a certain amount of product. In here, which we'll go into now, is basically the fly chamber. So basically this is where we breed the insects, but maybe just the chicken and egg story, but effectively we're now talking breeding. So these larvae, which are quite big and plump, are effectively our prize bull. These ones we're allowed to mature longer, so they're given more feed, about 3 times the amount of feed as a production larva, and they grow for about twice as long. And that allows them to get much bigger, build up their fat reserves, because as a fly, they don't actually eat. So there's a bit of like, the science is a little bit, it's a bit debatable at the moment, but effectively they do drink, so they will drink like a sugar solution, but they don't necessarily need food to survive. So it's a bit of a welfare question. We do give them some water and stuff in it in order to boost their fecundancy and get them breeding a bit more. But effectively what happens, so these guys, they've just been split from the frass. They will be separated to be put into the chambers now. And effectively they will go through a pupation period where they go from this sort of wriggly insect which is trying to get into sort of dark, moist area where they can pupate. They'll then pupate and then turn into a fly through that metamorphosis process. So this is Thailand.
I love this.
Basically.
Thailand. Look at them, they're so amazing.
So basically what happens in here is there's a bunch of cages in here. As you can see, we've developed these, what we call breeding lights, which mimic the parts of sunlight that the fly can actually see. And we've sort of gone through a number of R&D cycles to get to a point where we're happy with the light. Again, interesting news about the fly. Our flies over generations will adapt to our lights as well. So, for us, this breeding light works exceptionally well. 1, because it's a good light, but 2, because we've had multiple generations through this facility that will evolve naturally through it. So why insect farming is so exciting is because every 6 weeks you've got a new generation. So think of that. Every year you've got 8 cycles of survivability traits moving through the insect. So you can get sort of survival traits coming through, and especially if you can make your system consistent, you can optimize through that. But in the cages, basically, they breed, the pupa emerge, they come into the cage, they breed, and then they look to lay eggs into these little foam blocks down here, and it's above some sort of nice smelly stuff that, our staff will call it when it's sweet. So when it's fermented nicely, that's when the insects want to come and lay eggs in it. So sweet is the term that they use. And then every day they'll come and collect those little egg sponges out, and we'll put them into the nursery room where they'll be hatched out. This is an interesting protein, but it's more the functionality of the protein that makes it so interesting, and the functionality of that insect. So my view on insects is that animals will eat them as part of their diet, and it's not their complete diet.
Yeah.
As you have balanced your diet and your feed. So insects at a small amount, basically they drive gut health because of the chitin exoskeletons. It stimulates gut health, it stimulates the microbial community in the gut. You've got the antimicrobial peptides, again, helps to boost immunity. And you've got the lauric acid, which again has got energy value to it, and it's also got antiviral properties. So for me, this thing is like a superfood for dogs. But getting people past the fact that it's just a protein source is so critical, because
that's so important.
It's a nice protein, but it's, you can't compare it to fish oil, you can't compare it to soy milk. They are different, and they're also included into diets for different reasons than why we believe you should invite insect into